The Bermuda Triangle, one of the deadliest stretches of ocean on Earth. But what if there were an even deadlier one? In the Pacific, there may be. Why was this massive state-of-the-art ship suddenly lost with all hands?
Nothing could be done to save them.
What happened to this aircraft that vanished without a clue?
I think an entrance to another dimension opened in this area.
What deadly forces send sailors to their doom?
It's really a terrifying experience for those that were on board.
The world's most powerful navy knows the dangers well.
The moment you stop respecting it or fearing it is when things go wrong.
Join the search to fathom the Pacific Ocean's deadliest enigma. A quest that takes us over, on, and deep into the depths of the deep blue graveyard called the Devil's Sea. September 8th, 1980. Carrying 150,000 tons of iron ore, the bulk carrier Derbyshire is 230 miles off the east coast of Okinawa. The Derbyshire is a gigantic ship, longer than 3 football fields, twice the size of the Titanic, only 4 years old. From stem to stern, her design is state-of-the-art. Anyone should have felt perfectly safe sailing aboard her. But some, like able seaman Peter Lambert, didn't.
Whenever he came home on leave, he'd naturally talk about the ship he was on, about the people he'd met, the seafarers, the friends he'd made. And of course he wrote letters home. And as I say, he just said he just didn't like the Derbyshire, just something about it. There's a lot of people said the same thing.
Reluctantly, Peter signed on for one more voyage to earn enough money to get married. He was 19 years old. But his wedding would never take place. On September 9th, the Derbyshire and her entire crew disappeared. It was the largest British ship ever lost at sea, and no one could explain why. How could this giant ship, crewed by experienced mariners, simply vanish without a distress call and without leaving any trace? Could she be another victim of one of the Pacific Ocean's most enduring and frightening enigmas? To the south of Japan lies a vast expanse of empty ocean. Since the 1940s, scores of gigantic ships have mysteriously vanished in these cruel seas. Many of them were lost without even sending an SOS, leaving no clue as to their fate. But these waters have been claiming victims for centuries. Long ago, Japanese sailors gave this region a chilling name, Manoumi, the Devil's Sea. Japanese legends tell of unknown forces that overpower the strongest of ships and great sea monsters that drag sailors to their death. Today, the legend of sea monsters may have faded, but Japanese fishermen still fear the Devil's Sea, even as its rich bounty draws them to risk their lives.
A Devil's Sea is also an abundant sea. Fish always cluster here. These seas are very different from other places. Waves change quickly and unpredictably. So if you're relaxed on a boat in these places, you will get into trouble.
Intrigued by persistent reports of mysterious disappearances, some have searched for patterns that might solve the enigma of the Devil's Sea. Some claim that when plotted on a map, the modern disappearances form a triangle of doom. But that's only the beginning. The triangle in the Devil's Sea lies on the same lines of latitude as another infamous stretch of ocean on the other side of the world, the Bermuda Triangle. Could this be more than coincidence? Could the Devil's Sea be another Bermuda Triangle, or even deadlier than the Bermuda Triangle? There are those who think it might be. Author and expert in paranormal phenomena, Professor Junichi Yaoi has controversial theories about why so many ships have disappeared in the Devil's Sea.
There are many possible answers for this. Basically, I think some of the tankers sank because of the condition of the sea, because these incidents happen in seas which could be rough, or because of storms. However, if these tankers had just disappeared, I would say they might have gone to another dimension. I think there was an entrance to this other dimension opened from that area.
Most scientists dismiss Professor Yaoi's theories as science fiction. But in the Devil's Sea, ships keep disappearing. January 2002. The MV Linjae, a Chinese freighter with 19 crew on board, fails to arrive at the Japanese port of Kagoshima. As months go by, authorities are at a loss to explain what has happened to the Linjae. She has disappeared without a distress call and without leaving any signs of her fate. Professor Yaoi has his own theories on what may have happened.
Let me explain it with an easy example. Imagine a radio wave. TV programs, such as a drama, a documentary, and news are made in a studio. When these programs are broadcast, their mode is changed to a radio wave, which we can't see nor touch. So what I'm telling you is maybe the different dimension is here in the place we live, but we just can't see nor touch it.
While some find Professor Yaoi's theories a comforting way to explain the unexplainable, maritime experts remain skeptical.
I'm a disbeliever, probably a fairly strong disbeliever of anything like that.
David Mearns is a shipwreck hunter with an impressive record of locating lost ships and a pragmatic attitude to the paranormal.
I'm hired by people to come up with answers in a purely scientific and technical matter. So to actually come back and say, well, you know, I just can't explain it. It must be that Bermuda Triangle thing or the Pacific Triangle. And, you know, I don't think I'd have much credibility any longer.
In 1994, David and his team faced one of their biggest challenges to date: solve the mystery of the lost ship Derbyshire. It would be a mission that would push even these experts to their very limits. This time they faced a formidable foe, perhaps the toughest ever, the Devil's Sea. The crews of Patrol Squadron 47 know how hard it is to find anything on this featureless ocean. The U.S. Navy's eyes in the sky are charged with anti-submarine warfare, surveillance, and search and rescue,
There's really nowhere in this theater that we can't get to within a certain amount of time. We've always got a ready plane that'll launch within 1 hour. That's always available. So if there's any kind of search and rescue mission needs to be done, any kind of piracy activity, anything that has to be done, BP-47 can get on station as soon as possible.
The airmen know this region like the back of their hands, but even they can't explain everything they experience out here.
There have been some stories, there's been some rumors about strange things happening on the aircraft. Acoustically, we pick things up that sometimes don't get recorded. You know, we'll hear something that sounds kind of funny. We'll get back, we'll play it on the recordings, it's just not there. Yeah, there's a lot of stories about seatbelts coming uncrossed, hatches opening and closing by themselves in different areas you fly around.
In a high-tech, high-risk job like this, it pays to be on your guard. The men and women who fly these unfriendly skies know that it isn't just ships that disappear out here. The skies over the Devil's Sea have claimed their share of planes. One mysterious disappearance more than any other haunts the crews that fly here every day. March 22nd, 1957, 4:48 a.m. A USAF C-97 Stratofreighter departs Wake Island, bound for Tokyo International Airport with 67 military personnel on board. The flight is scheduled to take 9.5 hours, and sufficient fuel for 13.5 hours is on board. For 8 hours, the flight progresses normally. At 2:30 p.m., the pilot radios an estimated arrival time of 5 p.m. and adds that all equipment is functioning normally. Weather in the region is good. Flying conditions are nearly perfect. An hour and 15 minutes later, the pilot radios that he's 200 miles from Tokyo. Air traffic controllers expected the aircraft to arrive within 2 hours. But the C-97 never touches down at the airfield. Search and rescue flights scour thousands of square miles of ocean surface, retracing the plane's flight path. They find nothing. The giant Stratofreighter has vanished into thin air. Something in or over the Devil's Sea was powerful enough to wipe the massive aircraft from existence. What could have happened to this formidable aircraft, built for combat, flying in perfect conditions? To this day, no one knows. It remains a mystery, and an unknown hazard that the men and women of the military must accept in the line of duty.
Normal radar altimeter is 1,000 pilot.
The Devil's Sea hides its secrets well, but daring expeditions and groundbreaking research are beginning to reveal some startling answers to age-old questions. Just like the Bermuda Triangle, nothing is ever as it seems in the Devil's Sea. The Devil's Sea, south of Japan, has earned a reputation as a Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific. Giant ships sailing through these waters have disappeared suddenly and without a trace. The Japanese Coast Guard report over 2,500 shipping accidents in the waters around Japan every year. These deadly waters are vast and unforgiving. The chances of finding a ship lost out here makes finding a needle in a haystack look easy. That's why, 14 years after the giant ship Derbyshire was lost without a trace in the Devil's Sea, most believe she would never be found. An official report blamed the forces of nature, and the case was closed. But the families of the Derbyshire's crew weren't willing to let them go quietly into the night. They wanted answers.
All we wanted really was the evidence to prove exactly what happened to that ship and why 44 people had lost their lives. We were told the only way we'd get a reopened formal investigation is if we had new evidence, and the new evidence would only be the Derbyshire. And everyone was confident, the shipping industry that is, that would never find that ship.
But the families refused to give up. In July 1994, an expedition team led by David Mearns of Oceaneering Technologies headed into the Devil's Sea, convinced that they could crack the case. Their hopes were pinned on one slim lead. At the time that the Derbyshire was lost, search and rescue planes reported an oil slick not far from her last known position.
No one else had really used oil as the primary clue to actually go out and find a ship. So there was some uncertainty at the time about, how big the area could be. Is the oil directly above the ship, or is the oil being set down current, 10 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles? Nobody really knew. But my gut feeling was that it was an excellent marker, and that would lead us to the wreck of Derbyshire.
On this clue alone, David Mearns and his team would try to achieve the impossible: find the Derbyshire and lay the mystery to rest. It was one thing to mount a search, but on this vast and violent ocean, the odds of finding Derbyshire were astronomical. The ocean floor lay miles below, and even if Derbyshire was down there was no telling what wreckage may remain 14 years after she was lost. Against these staggering odds, the expedition team placed their faith in a state-of-the-art device: the side-scan sonar towfish. Towed behind their vessel, it would travel along the ocean floor and send back pictures from 2.5 miles below. But these sonar sweeps would also be a race against time. Every day of searching would cost tens of thousands of dollars. The search team had enough money for only 8 days at sea. The sonar towfish descended beneath the waters of the Devil's Sea and began transmitting eerie images from the ocean floor. To the untrained eye, they were a jumble of shapes and shades, but to David Mearns, something stood out.
Down in the end of that line, we actually started seeing some things that looked a bit suspicious. And as we went on to the next line, we saw even more trace. And then finally the third line, we went right over to something which was a great big dense patch of hard material. Whether it was rock or wreck, we couldn't tell. Look at that one falling right across.
Could this be the break they were hoping for? The team knew the success or failure of the expedition hung in the balance. Everything depended on what they would see next, as the ship began its second pass.
As we were approaching, literally right to the point of the sonar starting to pick up the images, we lost the towfish. Just ping, like that. So this very heavy, double-armored steel cable just snapped. And there goes our $600,000 towfish off the back of the ship, and we knew immediately it was lost.
The sonar towfish, their best chance of success, was lying 2.5 miles below on the seabed. Time was running out. Round 1 to the Devil's Sea. And before a recovery can be attempted, a storm threatens on the horizon, and the team must batten down the hatches and brace for impact. They're painfully aware of what the weather can do out here. In living memory, a storm devastated the most powerful navy ever to sail the seas. Today, that same navy is armed with awesome technology and steeled by the lessons of history. But are these sailors destined to once again face the wrath of the Devil's Sea? For centuries, the Devil's Sea has terrified all who sailed its treacherous waters and taken many of them into its deadly depths. This is a place so fearsome, it spawned ancient legends of demonic forces and modern speculation that it might be another Bermuda Triangle. But since the middle of the 20th century, a powerful human presence has cruised its mysterious waters. At the end of World War II, the U.S. Navy 7th Fleet based itself in Japan and has ruled the Pacific ever since. The 7th Fleet sails Japanese waters without fear, at least of any human adversary. But these sailors know that if you drop your guard, the Devil's Sea can turn on you in the blink of an eye.
A lot of times you have fair winds and following seas. That's as good as you get. You look out here on the horizon and stuff, we got a nice breeze, sun shining. You know, if I wasn't in the Navy, I'd probably be out here getting a tan right now. But we could walk out here 4 hours from now and bam, just like that. It seems like the devil's beating his wife. So you never know what's gonna happen.
To survive in the Devil's Sea, you have to know what it's about to throw at you. In this danger zone, the Top Guns aren't fighter pilots, but a handful of meteorologists who scan the sea and sky for any sign of trouble. For these men, failure is not an option. The slightest error could take them into the path of danger, and some of the most murderous weather the planet could generate will slam into their ships. It seems incredible that these powerful warships, built to repel the most daunting foes, could be so vulnerable to the assaults of nature. But the Devil's Sea has already shown what it can do to them. A tragedy that still haunts the Navy. December 1944. World War II rages in the Pacific. The suicide squadrons of the Japanese kamikaze are the most feared enemy in this theater. But the terror they inspire is about to be surpassed. Task Force 38, a U.S. Navy carrier battle group, pounds Japanese forces in the Philippines, softening them up before MacArthur's invasion hits the beach. After 3 days of bombarding the enemy, they must break off the attack and steam into formation to refuel. But just over the horizon, a deadly force is gathering strength. A force far more destructive than anything the Japanese could throw at them. As the ships struggle to refuel in growing seas, they're stalked by the growing fury of a powerful typhoon. There's nowhere to hide as the storm strikes. Suddenly, the sailors of Task Force 38 are thrown into the fight of their lives.
The seas were described as mountainous, very high seas, and of course the ships were rolling and pitching. The wind was between 50 and 75 knots with gusts of as much as 120. So the noise level was terrific, and of course the ships were moving from side to side and up and down. It was really a terrifying experience for those that were on board. In fact, there were some sailors who had faced the kamikaze menace and found that the typhoon was probably the worst experience of their lives.
For the men of Task Force 38, the next 24 hours were a living hell. Storm-force winds and 60-foot waves pounded them, capsizing 3 destroyers, badly mauling 16 other ships, sweeping more than 200 planes off the carriers, starting raging fires below decks. When it was over, 765 American sailors were dead. It was the U.S. Navy's worst natural disaster of the 20th century. The mighty fleet limped back to port, bearing the scars of battle. The murderous typhoon had caught Task Force 38 by surprise. To prevent a disaster like this from ever happening again, the Navy set up weather forecasting stations throughout the Pacific. Today, the U.S. Navy Meteorological and Oceanographic Command in Yokosuka, Japan, is on high alert. There's a powerful typhoon brewing in the Devil's Sea. This deadly region is a typhoon factory. Its warm waters can generate as many as 30 killer storms in a year, maelstroms of 200-mile-per-hour winds and waves up to 60 feet high, racing at 50 miles per hour across the sea, devastating everything in their path.
Maximum seas associated with the storm at this time were about 28 feet. So we're keeping ships well clear of that area. We're keeping ships well clear of the coast of China, and they're expecting that storm to maintain winds of about 80 knots of gusts, 105 knots as it progresses west.
When the winds surpass 170 knots, or 195 miles per hour, a typhoon becomes a super typhoon, one of nature's most devastating forces, and a naval forecaster's worst nightmare.
In a super typhoon, you can have seas well in excess of 35 feet. Much larger than you ever want to see a ship encounter. Very capable of sinking ships, grounding ships, destroying harbor facilities and housing on islands. Just absolutely devastating to anything that they encounter. 170 knots will tear down concrete walls and permanent structures.
A naval weatherman's job is to ensure that when a meteorological monster like this churns across the sea, one thing that it won't encounter is a ship of the U.S. Navy. If they're close enough to land, they can ride out the storm in the relative safety of a harbor. But ships too far from land have no option but to ride out the fury of the storm. Many of the ships lost in the Devil's Sea have disappeared during the worst winter months, when storms are most frequent and deadly. But these are giant ships, built to withstand the worst conditions. A typhoon alone shouldn't sink them. When the giant bulk carrier MV Derbyshire sailed into the Devil's Sea, it was September 1980, the heart of the annual typhoon season. At 10:19 a.m. on September 9th, the captain reported that Derbyshire was battling 70-mile-per-hour winds and 30-foot waves. But the captain wasn't especially worried. He was confident that a ship as large and well-designed as his should have no trouble surviving even such severe weather. He radioed that their arrival in port would be delayed by no more than a few days. Instead, Derbyshire disappeared without a trace. How could he have been so tragically wrong? Could the answer lie buried beneath the waves? Violent forces lurk down here. Forces that modern science struggle to fathom. Forces that may hold answers to the mysteries of the Devil's Sea. Some call Japan's Devil's Sea the Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific. Ships and airplanes vanish here without a trace. Could the answers to the mysteries lie here, far beneath the stormy surface. Down here lurk powerful, deadly forces. Forces that imperil all who sail on or under the Devil's Sea. The Devil's Sea has been a watery grave for submariners. It took an especially heavy toll on the submarine fleets of World War II. 1 in 5 U.S. Navy submarines never returned from the sea, and nearly half of the 52 U.S. submarines lost during World War II met uncertain fates. Today, researchers are uncovering the deepest secrets of the Devil's Sea. The Japanese Marine Science and Technology Center regularly send craft into these dark depths. The Shinkai 6500 submersible is the pride of the fleet, built to dive to the bottom of the world's deepest oceans. Marine scientists spend long hours in the inky depths, opening up an unseen world on a scale that is scarcely believable. In some places, the deep rifts in the ocean floor drop 37,000 feet beneath the surface. If the highest mountain in the world, Mount Everest, were to rise from this abyss, it would still be over a mile below the waves. Researchers have only scratched the surface of this undersea world. Could this be the final resting place of the World War II submarines lost to unknown causes? There is no telling what these shadowy depths could hide. Some have even suggested that there is an alien life force lurking beneath the Devil's Sea. One account from a Russian research scientist was widely reported in the paranormal press. On August 18, 1980, the Soviet vessel Vladimir Vobirov was returning from a research mission off the coast of Japan. Expedition leader Professor Platonov claimed he was on watch when suddenly an unidentified submerged object burst from the sea and circled the ship. According to the professor, it was cylindrical in shape and scorched the area with a blinding blue light. The professor reported that the strange craft was like nothing of this world, an unidentified object that circled the ship for several minutes and then plunged back into the ocean as suddenly as it had appeared. Over the years, others have told similar tales, and the folklore of the Devil's Sea has grown. But there are other explanations for strange objects bursting from the water. Japanese scientists dismissed the notion of an undersea alien life force.
To be honest, almost all phenomena are explainable through our knowledge, and I have never seen such a strange phenomenon.
So what power of nature could send objects shooting to the surface miles above? One answer can be found at the western depths of the Devil's Sea, where the Earth's molten core threatens to break through the fragile crust. Without warning, violent forces can burst from the ocean floor and then disappear just as quickly, leaving no evidence of their fury. Except perhaps the mystery of a vanished ship. In the 1950s, a New York Times report on a mysterious disappearance first brought the world's attention to the Devil's Sea. September 23, 1952, the Kayumaru 5, a Japanese Coast Guard research vessel with 31 crew aboard, heads for the Myojin Reef in the Devil's Sea to monitor strange underwater activity. Making good speed, the crew expects to reach the reef in less than a day. But after 3 days of radio silence, the Coast Guard declares the vessel missing. Ships in the area change course to search for survivors. None of the Kayumaru's crew is found. The mystery deepens until, by chance, the searchers witness a violent natural phenomenon. If this had suddenly erupted under the Kayumaru, she would have gone instantly to her doom, with no time even to signal her distress. Searchers found a few scraps of wreckage, but none of them bore a ship's name, and there were no survivors to tell their tale. The fate of the Kayumaru would remain a secret of the Devil's Sea. Grieving relatives were forced to accept that the ship was simply gone, and with it, their husbands, sons, and fathers. The Japanese Coast Guard warned ships to avoid Myojin Reef because of the danger of an undersea eruption, and a legend was born. But rumblings in the depths can kill in more ways than one. When an earthquake strikes Japanese coastal towns, residents run to the hills. An earthquake on the seafloor sends a shockwave racing to the surface. A bulge of water is displaced and moves swiftly through the ocean. This irresistible force is the tsunami, the deadliest of waves. In the open ocean, tsunami waves can travel at over 500 miles per hour. Anyone caught in its path, on land or in a harbor, has no chance. As a child, Takao Suzuki was one of the lucky few when a tsunami annihilated his village.
It was terrible. At 12 o'clock, the earthquake struck. A few minutes later, the tsunami came. People tried to escape. The people who died were not so far away from us, but they were killed.
Throughout history, tsunamis have taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Today, tsunamis still wreak havoc along the coast of Japan. And all too often, people don't realize the threat they pose until it's too late. No one is more aware of the awesome force of the tsunami than Chip McCreary of the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center.
Even a 10-foot tsunami is quite destructive because sea level will rise by 10 feet and it'll stay high for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And during that time period, of course, a lot of water rushes on shore, and it can rush on shore with a high velocity. This not only floods areas, but the force of the water knocks things down and picks up debris, which in turn acts as battering rams.
It's no wonder that some have suggested that these monster waves could be responsible for the ships missing in the Devil's Sea. But those who know the tsunami best say it's unlikely.
A big destructive tsunami might only be a meter or less in height out on the open ocean, and because these waves have very long wavelengths, the time it takes for the wave to go up and then go back down is a long time. It might be 20 minutes, even up to an hour. So this slow rise and fall of the sea out in the middle of the ocean is quite unnoticed.
Although they cause massive destruction on the coast, Tsunamis can't take the blame for a ship missing at sea. Far out to sea, time was running out on the expedition searching for the lost ship Derbyshire. There had been a promising sonar scan of the seafloor where the ship was reported missing. But before they could make a positive identification, the sonar towfish had been lost, claimed by the Devil's Sea. Now the storm relented and the mission could go ahead. They would attempt to recover the towfish and identify the target. But would they be prepared for what they'd find 2.5 miles below? Nothing is safe in the Devil's Sea, thought by some to be the Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific. Ships disappear from the surface, submarines dive to their doom, aircraft vanish from the skies. Some blame unnatural forces, some the forces of nature. There's no doubt that this is one of the deadliest and most mysterious stretches of ocean in the world. And one piece of the puzzle was proving to be frustratingly elusive. The Devil's Sea had foiled one attempt to solve the mystery of the lost ship Derbyshire. The expedition team had lost their sonar towfish just as it was beginning to transmit images of a suspicious formation on the ocean floor. Now they would launch a rescue mission. A desperate attempt to recover the towfish and identify the target below. The team readied their remote-operated vehicle, or ROVE. This mission would push it to its limits. Would the ROVE's titanium frame withstand the crushing pressures that it would encounter as it descended? A few slender cables were all that kept this high-tech submersible tethered to the ship. If anything went wrong 2.5 miles down, there was nothing anyone on the surface could do.
So the tension was incredibly high. You've got a very expensive piece of equipment sitting on the seabed, and there's a wreck down on the seabed that you know it's the wreck you want, but without that picture proving it, no one will believe you. So if you had come back, you know, without being able to do that, you'd have failure on every single front. We recovered our towfish, which was technically a very difficult thing to do, picking up this 1-ton probe and bringing it onto the deck. And then we had to dive on the target, and we had about 6 hours of time left before we actually had to leave.
The anxiety on board grew as never before seen images appeared out of the gloom. The ROVE picked up a trail of glittering iron ore, the cargo the Derbyshire was carrying when it disappeared. Twisted metal confirmed that the target was a shipwreck. And then, the moment they had all been hoping for. Proof at last that the mighty ship had not simply disappeared, that behind this mystery at least, there lay an answer.
Finding a shipwreck is a fantastic feeling. People had predicted she'd never be found. So, you know, the moment that you actually start seeing wreckage, to be able to see that image is a great feeling.
For Paul Lambert of the Derbyshire Family Association, the news brought relief and a sudden crushing sense of loss.
A lot of families at the back of their minds still did not accept the Derbyshire had sank. You know, there's a lot of desert islands in that area, and some of them still felt that the husbands, the sons and daughters were actually on a desert island.
We remember those who lost their lives at sea while sailing on the merchant vessel Derbyshire.
And when you actually find the ship, then that belief is taken away. So there's a lot of mixed emotions, you know, the sudden reality that, you know, the loved one wasn't coming home. Even though it was 14 years after the ship had sank, they still held on to that belief.
Jeffrey Victor Underhill.
After 14 painful years, the families of the disappeared had the answers they'd been searching for.
Raymond William Taylor. Peter Lambert. Nigel Coates.
Against the odds and confounding the critics, David Mearns and his team had achieved the impossible. They had found the twisted remains of the Derbyshire. But the question remained, what catastrophic event could have sent her to the bottom? The findings of the expedition helped maritime experts piece together the doomed ship's final moments. Derbyshire was caught in a typhoon she couldn't outrun. The storm waves were almost exactly the same length as the ship, so as Derbyshire descended down each wave, it pushed her bow into the next one. As wave after wave rolled over her, they tore away her bow fittings and flooded her forward hold.
Now the bow is actually biting into the waves, and they probably knew at that time they were in real trouble. They could feel it. An experienced master and crew could actually feel the sluggishness of the vessel rising to the waves, because they know the forward section is now being flooded.
With her bow held underwater, it was only a matter of time before the waves stove in cargo hatches 1 and 2, and the ship began a descent from which she could never recover. The relentless sea tore her into 3 pieces and crushed her as she sank.
The crew had no chance. There was no way for them to launch their lifeboats or to be saved in any way. They just had to hope that the ship somehow rode it out even while she was foundering. But I think there would have been some minutes there where they knew, possibly as many as 10 minutes, where they knew that that nothing could be done to save them.
The last act of the expedition was to gently place a memorial plaque on the Derbyshire's foredeck, inscribed with a prayer for her lost souls. Tragically, the Derbyshire wasn't the only ship lost in this way. Just a few years after Derbyshire was lost, her 2 sister ships were also torn apart by storms they ought to have survived, because of the same design faults. The Derbyshire tragedy led to improved safety features that are now standard on new ships. But many older ships suffer the very same flaws that led to Derbyshire's demise. For Paul Lambert, the fight is far from over. The mystery of the Derbyshire may be solved, but he won't rest until every ship is made safe.
I don't want my brother, Peter, and the other 43 people's lives to have been lost for nothing. And the only way we can do that is to get the recommendations implemented. I want people to remember Derbyshire and for the lives she's going to save.
It may be cold comfort, but there is some comfort in the knowledge that many mysterious disappearances can be accounted for. And every mystery solved improves the odds for the thousands of seafarers who venture out onto the Devil's Sea every day. Maritime experts are confident that, eventually, even the most perplexing mysteries will give up their secrets.
When you're at sea on a ship and you're out there and there's nothing else, there's you and your crew and your vessel, things happen, nobody knows. you know, and Derbyshire was one of those ships where if we hadn't found it, nobody would ever know. And if you wanted to think she was overcome by the forces of some unexplained phenomenon, people could have believed that as well. But we've proved that that was incorrect. Now we know why she sank. So that's what gives me the confidence that these things are explainable. At least in the case of Derbyshire it is.
But for some, the enigma will always remain.
Many people now realize that there are many things we can't solve, even though we have witnessed great progress in science. However, I don't think I can persuade people who insist that there is nothing science cannot solve.
Every day, this vast expanse of ocean continues to be plied by hundreds of ships, braving the forces of nature and the terrors of the unknown. As the Devil Sea casts a shroud over its mysteries, the sailors can only pray that they won't fall victim to the Pacific Ocean's deadliest waters.